The dining room glowed with golden light, the hum of clinking glasses echoing off the walnut-paneled walls of Alder and Pine, one of Portland's most exclusive restaurants. Seated at the long mahogany table was Sloane Carter, 36, founder and CEO of Carter & Crumb. Her eyes shimmered as she raised a crystal flute of champagne, surrounded by investors, journalists, and her beaming parents. After 8 years of sweat and sacrifice, she had just closed an $8 million deal that would take her family's once-failing bakery national. To anyone watching, it looked like a perfect evening. The daughter who left a lucrative career in venture capital had returned home, resurrected her parents' humble bakery on Hawthorne Boulevard, and transformed it into one of the most buzzed-about healthy snack brands in the country. The launch of Carter & Crumb's new line of organic snack boxes had just gone viral. Sales were soaring. Distribution deals were finalized. And tonight, the future was being toasted. "I remember when your parents' shop was just a little place with 3 staff and a leaking roof," said Mark Keller, the lead investor from Greyrock Ventures, lifting his glass. "Now look at this. Nationwide shipping, an online subscriber base of 40,000, and retail presence in Whole Market and Green Grove." He smiled at Sloane. "All because of your vision." Sloane's father, Frank Carter, nodded with pride. "When we started Carter's Bakehouse 25 years ago, we never imagined it would become this." Her mother, Mary Ann, in a pearl-button blazer and a polite smile, touched Sloane's hand under the table. "And your brother will be so proud to return and join this journey," she whispered. "He's ready to help guide the business to the next stage. It's time he took his place." The words stabbed through Sloane's euphoria like ice water. She turned, searching her mother's face, hoping she had misheard. "You mean Brandon?" Sloane asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, dear," Marianne said, still smiling for the cameras. "He's just finished his executive business program. This company needs real financial leadership now." Real financial leadership. Sloane kept her expression calm, but the past 8 years flashed before her eyes. The bakery had been 3 months from shutting down when she gave up her Manhattan apartment, walked away from a partner-track role at Ridgeway Capital, and poured her life savings into her parents' floundering business. She worked 18-hour days, renovated the shop herself with second-hand equipment, built supplier networks, launched the e-commerce platform, and slept in the office for over a year. Meanwhile, Brandon had been abroad, posting photos from Rome and Barcelona while finding himself. She had rebuilt this brand from ashes. And now they wanted to hand it over. Mark Keller was still speaking, asking about leadership plans post-investment. Sloane smiled, cleared her throat, and responded with poise. "I will continue as CEO while my parents act as brand ambassadors. Continuity is key for customer trust." "Brilliant," Mark said, scribbling something in his notebook. But then Marianne interjected, "Brandon is coming back next week, and we expect he will take a more central role. Sloane has done a beautiful job with creative strategy, but now we need someone with Brandon's education." There it was. The real reason her parents had encouraged her to take the CEO title but never formally inked the structure. It had always been temporary in their eyes. "I see," Mark said, his eyes narrowing. Joanna Lynn, another investor, stopped mid-sip and glanced at Sloane with concern. Dinner ended with polite applause and dessert, but the air had changed. Sloane walked out of Alder and Pine with a frozen smile on her lips. In the back of the car, her parents chatted excitedly about how Brandon would be amazed by the new factory layout and finally take over properly. Sloane said nothing, because she was already preparing for what was coming. Not with anger, but with precision. She had built this company from the ground up. She had also built a way out. The following morning, the office on Southeast Belmont was quiet, the industrial lights humming faintly overhead as Sloane Carter unlocked the door at 6:15. The aroma of almond flour and baked oats still lingered in the air from Friday's final test batch, but today felt different. Not because of the bakery, because of what she had to do. She set down her coffee, opened her laptop, and pulled up a folder she had not touched in nearly 11 months. It was labeled simply, Project ELM. named after her grandmother Eleanor Louise Martin, the woman who had taught Sloane how to bake, and how to never bow to people who underestimated you. Inside the folder were projections, licensing arrangements, alternate branding concepts, a revised cap table, and something else, an entire business structure built without the Carter name. It was her insurance policy, her exit ramp, her rebellion. She had built it slowly, in slivers of time between supplier calls and board meetings, refining it when her mother made dismissive remarks or when Brandon posted another vacation photo from his learning sabbatical. She had never thought she would use it. Not until last night. "Sloane," came a voice behind her. It was Rico Morales, the maintenance manager who had been with the company since she first reopened the bakery. "Just prepping for a meeting," she said with a soft smile. "After last night? You need to sleep sometimes, you know." She nodded but didn't reply. When Rico left, she made her first call. Talia Rhodes picked up on the second ring, her voice groggy but alert. "Sloane, you never call this early unless it's either a disaster or a win. I need your eyes on something. And maybe your legal brain, too. Send it. I'll be there in 40. By 8:30, Talia was seated across from Sloane in the conference room, sipping coffee and flipping through the documents. She wore a soft grey coat and had her reading glasses perched halfway down her nose, but her tone was razor sharp. "You built an entire parallel company with licensing rights and trade secret protections while running this one." Sloane nodded. "I needed to be ready." Talia looked at her for a long time. "Tell me what happened last night." Sloane recounted the dinner, every word from her mother, the frozen smile, the investors' shifting expressions. She told her about Brandon's upcoming return, the assumption that he would replace her, and the subtle but familiar sting of being temporary in her own creation. Talia was silent for a moment. "Do they know about this plan?" "No. But Mark and Joanna will, by tomorrow. I've scheduled a private meeting." Talia exhaled. "You're going to start a whole new brand?" "I might. If they try to push me aside, yes." By noon, Sloane had called her 3 closest allies. Nina Reyes from marketing, Leo Grant from operations, Harper Wu from product development. The 3 had been with her since the early days, back when the bakery couldn't even afford heat in the winter, back when they took turns delivering online orders themselves in the rain. They showed up within the hour, confused but loyal. She didn't tell them everything, just that she might need to make a hard decision soon, that things might change. They didn't hesitate. Nina looked her in the eye and said, "Where you go, we go." Leo added, "We've built something here. With you. Not with your brother." Sloane didn't cry, but something cracked open in her chest. Not grief. Not relief. Something solid and steely. Something that had been waiting to take the lead. That night, she returned to her apartment, overlooking the Willamette River, and stood at the window as the streetlights flickered below. Brandon Carter was due to land Sunday afternoon. Her parents would likely meet him at the airport. They had probably already told him to prepare for his first executive meeting on Monday. She looked back at her computer screen. Project ELM stared at her like a loaded weapon, ready to fire. Tomorrow, she would hand it to the people holding $8 million, and let them decide what her name was worth. Sunday morning arrived with clouds blanketing the Portland sky, the city streets slick with drizzle. At 9 o'clock sharp, Mark Keller and Joanna Lynn walked through the glass doors of Carter & Crumb headquarters, accompanied by 2 associates from their legal team. Their expressions were calm, but the undertone was unmistakable, concern wrapped in professionalism. Sloane greeted them in the upstairs conference room with quiet confidence. No small talk. No coffee tray. Just a thick folder labeled Transition Risk Assessment, and a slide deck already queued up on the wall monitor. She had worn no makeup, only her usual navy blazer and rolled-up sleeves, her hair in a bun. She wanted them to see the architect, not the daughter. "Before we proceed with finalizing the investment agreement," Sloane began, "I need to show you what's been happening behind the scenes." Mark leaned forward, brows furrowed. "We're listening." She handed them the folder. Page 1 showed the current Carter and Crumb leadership structure, Sloan as CEO, her parents as advisors, and a clear reporting chain. Page 2 showed a projected change, one she believed was already in motion. Brandon Carter as CEO, Sloan shifted to a vague role titled Creative Director with no direct reports. Mark didn't speak. Joanna's pen tapped against the folder, her mouth a hard line. "This is not what we agreed to," Joanna said. "No," Sloan replied. "It isn't. But it is the plan my family has been quietly engineering. They've never seen me as the permanent solution. I was just a placeholder until Brandon was ready." "And page 3? Mark asked. Sloan exhaled slowly, then clicked the presentation remote. "That's my counteroffer," she said. On the screen appeared a sleek logo, Eleanor and Finch. A new company. A new brand. With projections, product designs, and supplier transition letters already drafted. The business model mirrored Carter and Crumb's most successful lines but offered more flexibility, new verticals, and stronger ownership protections. It was bolder, more scalable, and free from family ties. Joanna looked up. "You've built a full corporate blueprint." "I've also spoken with my 3 manufacturing partners," Sloan said. "Their contracts are up for renewal next quarter. They've indicated they'll follow my lead." Mark narrowed his eyes. "You're saying you want us to redirect our investment to this new entity?" "If it comes to that," she answered. There was silence. The kind of silence that follows a bombshell in a boardroom. Mark finally leaned back and steepled his fingers. "You were prepared to walk," he said. "I still am," she replied. He nodded slowly. "We backed Carter and Crumb because of you, Sloan. We've reviewed the numbers, seen the growth, the product loyalty, the innovation. You are the company's heartbeat." Joanna turned to the legal team. "We'll need to review the terms if this pivot becomes necessary." "There's one more thing," Sloan said, clicking to the final slide. "I've kept this plan to myself out of respect. But if my family insists on forcing me out, I will not go quietly. I won't fight them. I'll just leave with my team, my partners, and the value I created." "And your parents?" Mark asked. "I'll speak to them tonight," she said. "They deserve the truth. And a choice." By the time the meeting ended, Mark and Joanna had agreed to pause the final investment paperwork pending the outcome of Sloan's conversation with her family. If the Carter leadership remained intact, with Sloan as CEO, the original deal would proceed. If not, they would pivot to Eleanor and Finch. That evening, the Carters' home in the West Hills glowed with soft light. The fireplace was lit. Photos of Brandon from childhood to graduation filled the mantel. Sloan sat across from her parents, her voice calm but unyielding. "I'm not asking for a favor," she told them. "I'm asking for recognition. I have built this company from the ground up. And if you plan to replace me with Brandon, I will walk away, today." Marianne's face tightened, her hands clenched in her lap. Frank looked stricken. "But he's your brother," Marianne said. "He was always meant to." "No," Sloan interrupted. "He was assumed to. Because he's your son. Because I was never supposed to want this. But I do. And I earned it." Her father tried to suggest a co-leadership role. "You could share the title," he said gently. "I've been running this company alone for 8 years," Sloan replied. "Why would I need a co-leader now?" They stared at her as if they were seeing her for the first time. Not as a daughter. Not as a stopgap. But as the force behind everything that still had their name on it. "I'm not threatening you," Sloan said finally. "I'm offering you a last opportunity. Keep me as CEO. Or lose everything I've built." And with that, she stood, leaving them in silence under the family portraits. Outside, the wind picked up. The city lights below shimmered like embers. Tomorrow was Monday. And everything would change. The office was unusually full by 7:30 the next morning. The scent of roasted hazelnut granola drifted from the kitchen test lab, but no one paid it any mind. Instead, tension buzzed through the halls like static. Sloane Carter stood in her office at the top floor, watching employees trickle in, some arriving early, others whispering in corners. Her core team had already assembled. Nina Reyes was reviewing a binder of marketing performance charts. Leo Grant checked his phone for shipment updates. Harper Wu was sketching new snack box packaging on her tablet, earbuds in but fully alert. They had come not just for the workday, but for her. Unspoken loyalty saturated the room. At 8:30, Frank and Marianne Carter arrived. Frank offered a nervous smile through the glass as they passed by Sloane's office. Marianne walked stiffly, dressed in formal navy, as if she were about to address shareholders. At 8:45, Brandon arrived. He strolled through the front doors like a returning prince, wearing a tailored blazer and loafers too shiny for Portland's damp sidewalks. His hair was perfectly coiffed. His eyes scanned the room with practiced warmth. He greeted unfamiliar staff by name, names he had clearly rehearsed, and shook hands with junior managers he had never met. "Excited to get started," he said brightly. "Mom says the leadership meeting is at 9. I've got a few ideas about restructuring our online growth funnels." Sloane, watching from behind her office glass, felt a wave of cold clarity. He wasn't just here to consult. He believed he had already arrived. He believed he was owed. At precisely 9, the elevator doors opened and Mark Keller entered with Joanna Lynn at his side. Behind them were Greyrock's legal advisors. They did not stop at the front desk. They walked straight to Sloane's office. Marianne's expression flickered. Frank stood slowly, glancing at Brandon, who was just pulling out a chair at the conference table as if to take the helm. "Mr. Keller," Marianne began, "let me introduce you to our son Brandon." "Actually," Mark said, cutting her off with quiet steel, "we're here to speak with Sloane. But it's best if everyone joins. In the conference room, please." The walk down the hall felt longer than usual. Employees lined the glass corridors, silent, sensing something significant. A few exchanged glances. Others stood still, watching. Inside the conference room, Sloane took her place at the head of the table. Brandon sat opposite, flanked by their parents. The investors and legal teams settled on either side, folders placed deliberately in front of them. Mark began, his tone measured but firm. "Let's be clear. Greyrock Ventures agreed to invest in Carter and Crumb because of Sloane's leadership. The business we evaluated was not a legacy operation. It was a modern brand with a proven growth engine built under her guidance." He paused, letting the words settle. "Since Friday, we've had reason to believe that the future leadership of the company may not align with our original agreement. We've been presented with alternative visions, one of which removes or demotes Sloane. This represents a material risk." Frank shifted uncomfortably. Marianne's jaw tightened. Brandon leaned forward, hands clasped with a false calm. "I understand your concern," he said, "but my executive MBA and consulting background. To replace the person who rebuilt the company," Joanna Lynn said, cutting in. "To override the leadership that drove 40,000 subscribers and landed our investment." Silence. Sloane didn't move. Her pulse was steady. She had already lived this moment in her mind 1,000 times. "We're prepared to offer two paths," Mark continued, sliding a folder toward the Carter family. "Option 1. Sloane remains CEO for a minimum of 5 years. Brandon may join in a supporting business development role. Your advisory positions remain. We proceed with the original investment terms." Marianne reached for the folder, fingers trembling. "Option 2, Joanna said, sliding a second document next to it. Greyrock redirects its $10 million investment, an increased offer, to a new entity, Eleanor and Finch, founded and led solely by Sloane, with no connection to the Carter name." Brandon's head snapped up. "You're offering her more? To leave?" Sloane finally spoke. I never wanted this to become a war. But I will not stand by and be replaced in the company I rebuilt from the ground up. I will not carry this family on my back, only to be pushed aside the moment it becomes profitable. You're threatening to abandon your legacy, Marianne whispered, voice tight with disbelief. No, Sloane said. I'm claiming what I created. You're the ones risking the legacy by refusing to acknowledge it. The conference room door opened. Nina, Harper, Leo, and at least a dozen more employees entered, silent and poised. They stood at the back of the room, not speaking, just standing. Daphne stepped forward. If Sloane leaves, she said clearly, we go with her. Brandon looked around, visibly shaken. You're choosing her over the family? We already did, Leo said quietly. A long time ago. For a long time, no one moved. Then Frank closed the folder and looked at Mark. We'll sign the first option, he said. Sloane remains CEO. Brandon sat back, stunned. Marianne said nothing. Her silence was heavier than argument. Joanna nodded. We'll have the legal team process it. The meeting ended, but nothing felt over. As everyone began to file out, Mark paused beside Sloane. You didn't just secure an investment, he said softly. You reclaimed your company. And as Sloane walked back through the office, past her team, past the people who had followed her through fire, she understood something. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. By Wednesday, the press release had gone out. Greyrock Ventures invests $8 million in Carter & Crumb's national expansion. CEO Sloane Carter to lead growth strategy. The news spread fast across food industry channels, entrepreneurship blogs, and even local headlines in Portland. For the public, it was a celebration. A clean, impressive win. But inside the Carter family, the air was anything but clear. Sloane sat at her desk, reviewing the final rollout timeline for their new warehouse in Boise, when Harper knocked lightly. Press wants a photo of the founding team. Should we include your parents? Sloane didn't answer right away. She thought of the previous day, how Marianne hadn't looked her in the eye after the deal was signed. How Brandon had barely said a word as he moved into his new office, which was deliberately placed 2 doors down from Sloane's and not across from hers. Include them, Sloane said at last. But only as brand advisors. Not executive leadership. Harper nodded and left, but the question lingered. How many people saw the full picture? How many understood that beneath the polished headlines was a battlefield of tension, silence, and strategic containment? The rest of the week moved quickly. Joanna's team reviewed compliance. The marketing department began revamping packaging to meet new national standards. Nina coordinated influencer campaigns with a sharpness that left the interns scrambling to keep up. And Brandon? Brandon floated. He gave himself a tour of the warehouse. Requested status reports he didn't understand. Suggested changes to social media strategy that were clearly 2 years outdated. But the staff, trained to be polite, entertained him, until he made his first real misstep. On Thursday afternoon, Brandon emailed the full leadership team, proposing a series of restructuring suggestions for the operations department. In his email, he referred to Leo Grant as a strong contributor, though perhaps more suited to logistic support than executive strategy. Leo, who had co-designed the scalable fulfillment model that made their national shipping possible, read the email in stunned silence. He did not respond. He simply printed the message and slid it across Sloane's desk. You said he'd have boundaries, Leo said evenly. He does, Sloane replied. And he just crossed one. She forwarded the email to Joanna with a subject line that read, Urgent, misalignment. The next day, Brandon was called into a closed-door meeting with the legal team and Mark Keller. He came out pale, avoiding everyone's eyes. Later, it was announced via internal memo that Brandon would be participating in an executive mentorship rotation, shadowing operations rather than directing them. In the staff cafeteria that afternoon, whispers turned into chuckles. Executive babysitting, someone muttered. But Sloane didn't smile. She knew that humiliation would not make her brother walk away. It would only deepen his resentment. And her parents. They remained quiet. Too quiet. Mary Ann stopped attending brand development meetings altogether. Frank came, but only offered faint suggestions, often repeating what others had already said. That Sunday evening, Sloane arrived at the old family bakery, now mostly used for community events. The lights were on. Her mother stood alone in the kitchen, rolling dough with silent precision. "You used to love this part," Sloane said gently. "Mornings in the bakery." Mary Ann didn't look up. "We built it for the family." "I know. We never expected it would belong to only one of our children." Sloane exhaled, leaning against the doorway. "It doesn't. It belongs to the people who show up. Brandon never did. You know that." Mary Ann pressed her fingers into the dough, kneading slowly. "You've always been strong-willed. And you've always pretended that wasn't a strength." Finally, Mary Ann looked up. Her eyes, tired and sharp, met Sloane's. "You didn't have to make it so public." "I didn't," Sloane said. "You did, when you made promises behind closed doors." There was nothing more to say. Sloane walked out, the warm scent of cinnamon and flour clinging to her coat as she stepped into the cold night air. The following Monday, Mark called unexpectedly. "We've had a new offer," he said. Sloane sat straighter. "From whom?" "A potential acquisition partner. National grocer. They want to talk joint branding. But only if you're the point of contact." Of course. Because it was never about the family name. It was always about her. It was just past 9 in the morning when Sloane Carter entered the glass-walled boardroom at the downtown offices of Rose and Willow, the investment firm representing Sun Glen Markets. The room was sleek, modern, and intentionally understated. White oak table, chrome fixtures, framed minimalist art on the wall. But the moment she stepped inside, all eyes turned to her. The grocery giant's expansion team was already seated. At the head of the table was Naomi Brenner, Sun Glen's head of partnerships, known in the industry for her razor-sharp business instincts and a famously low tolerance for fluff. She stood and offered her hand. "Sloane," Naomi said, "we've been looking forward to this." Sloane returned the shake with quiet confidence. "Likewise." Mark Keller took the seat beside her, a reassuring presence. Joanna Lynn was next to him, opening a folder as the others settled in. Naomi got right to the point. "We're looking to launch a curated premium snack line under our in-house brand next spring. Your current growth trajectory and brand identity, especially your sustainability focus, align exactly with what we need. But let me be clear. We are not interested in licensing a legacy family label. We're interested in your leadership." Sloane didn't flinch. "Then you'll get it." The next hour passed in rapid-fire pitches, logistics deep dives, packaging timelines, and co-branding sketches. Sloane delivered each answer precisely, referencing historical data, brand equity figures, and current projections from memory. At one point, Naomi leaned forward. "Are you prepared to scale to meet quarterly distribution quotas? We're talking 50,000 units per week at launch. We've already begun vetting an additional manufacturing partner in Seattle. I have samples from their first trial batch. Passed our quality thresholds yesterday." Joanna slid the sample documents across the table. Naomi reviewed them, eyes darting. Then she smiled. "I appreciate a CEO who knows her production numbers by heart." As the meeting closed, Naomi stood again. "I think we'll be able to move forward with a formal proposal, assuming full executive continuity remains intact." There it was again. No room for error. No room for replacement. Back at Carter and Crumb headquarters that afternoon, Sloane found Brandon in the break room, staring at a half-written whiteboard of marketing metrics. "Need help decoding it?" she asked dryly. He turned, startled, then composed himself. "I'm just adjusting our referral tracking." "We already optimized it," she said. 3/4 ago. He stepped aside, visibly deflated. I suppose you've got it all handled. I always have, she replied. He opened his mouth to say something else but stopped. Instead, he walked out, leaving the whiteboard behind. Sloane erased it without a second thought. Later that week, Frank Carter requested a private meeting. I just wanted to say, I've been reading the press, watching what you're building. Sloane folded her arms. And he hesitated. I think we did you a disservice. All those years. Assuming the business would go to Brandon. You didn't assume, she corrected. You decided. Frank looked down. Your mother. She always pictured him as the future. And what did you picture? He didn't answer. Sloane stepped closer. You taught me how to balance books when I was 14. You trusted me with payroll when I was 22. But the minute this became real, big, you looked away. I didn't know how to stand between my wife and my daughter, he said quietly. Sloane softened, just for a moment. You didn't have to. You just had to stand with me. The following day, Sun Glen Markets sent their formal letter of intent, a 12-month co-branded partnership agreement, pending final review. The deal was projected to increase Carter and Crumb's annual revenue by 30%. At the leadership meeting that evening, Sloane shared the news. Applause rippled around the table. Her team beamed. Even Mary Ann, seated near the corner, clapped softly. Brandon did not attend. After the meeting, Sloane stepped onto the rooftop terrace. The city stretched out beneath her, wet sidewalks, soft lights, the sound of streetcars in the distance. She had come home to save a sinking ship. Now, she was steering an empire. And for the first time, she felt the seat beneath her wasn't borrowed. It was hers. Because she had built it. By early spring, the office buzzed with preparations. Carter and Crumb's fulfillment center in Boise had doubled its output. The new co-branded snack line with Sun Glen Markets was in pre-launch, and press coverage surged. Food industry panels started naming Sloane Carter as one of the top female founders to watch. But with success came scrutiny. A regional podcast ran an interview with Brandon Carter, recorded weeks earlier. In it, he spoke confidently about the vision his family shared, and the multi-generational values embedded in the Carter and Crumb DNA. He referred to the company as a collaborative sibling effort, and when asked about the CEO's role, he answered, "We all wear many hats here." The interview went viral for all the wrong reasons. By noon that day, Twitter lit up with sarcastic quotes. "We all wear hats, sounds a lot like, I wear a suit while my sister runs the empire." Investors called. Journalists asked for clarification. Employees seethed. Nina stormed into Sloane's office with her phone in hand. "Do you want me to handle this, or would you rather burn him publicly?" Sloane didn't flinch. "Neither. We stay calm. But we respond." Later that afternoon, Carter and Crumb's official account posted a quiet but firm message. Carter and Crumb's success stems from clear leadership, hard work, and earned trust. We stand by our CEO, Sloane Carter, whose vision and effort built this company from the ground up. There is no confusion here. The message went viral, this time for the right reasons. Former employees, vendors, and even rival founders began sharing their own stories of watching Sloane carry the company through its hardest years. The public turned in her favor. Brandon's inbox filled with silence. That evening, Sloane sat alone in the bakery's original office. It still smelled faintly of almond oil and flour, though the space now served as an event venue. On the wall was the original wooden sign, Carter's Bakehouse. EST 1996. Her father had carved it himself. She stared at it for a long time, thinking. The next morning, she called a leadership meeting. "I want to talk about the brand," she began. "Where it came from. And where it's going." People looked up, alert. This company was born from love, but it was reborn through labor. And clarity matters. That's why I'm changing our name. A few gasps. A few raised brows. We're evolving Carter and Crumb to something more reflective of what we've become. The new name will be announced next quarter. It won't erase our roots, but it will reflect our reality. This is not a hand-me-down business. It's a built-from-scratch one. Harper Wu leaned in. What's the new name? Sloane smiled. Eleanor and Finch. Silence followed, until Leo broke it. That's the name on the backup files, he said. The plan you built when they tried to take it all. Sloane nodded. That name saved me. Now it will define us. Joanna Lynn approved the trademark filings 2 weeks later. The rebrand plan was set in motion. Packaging changes, website relaunch, public relations rollout. The timing aligned perfectly with the Sun Glen launch. Everything lined up like it had been destined. Only one meeting remained. She invited Frank and Marianne to the office on a quiet Thursday morning. No crowd. No investors. Just them and a folder on the table between them. I wanted you to hear it from me before it becomes public, Sloane said. We're changing the company name. Marianne blinked. Why? Because Carter and Crumb no longer reflects what we are. What I've made. You're erasing your father's name, she whispered. Sloane met her eyes. I'm carrying it forward. But this brand is mine now. The name, the structure, the value. And I won't spend another year apologizing for being the one who stayed. Frank looked down at the folder. His hands trembled slightly. You've done more than we ever imagined possible, he said quietly. We just didn't know how to let go. Marianne didn't speak. But her silence no longer stung. It no longer mattered. Sloane stood, ending the meeting. On her way out, she paused at the glass door where her name had once been etched below the company logo. It would soon be replaced. And that was exactly as it should be. Brandon Carter did not attend the rebrand announcement. He had RSVP'd with a vague email about prior engagements, and remained silent as the event gained traction online. Sloane expected as much. What she didn't expect was the voicemail he left 3 days later. You made your point, his voice said flatly. I get it now. Hope it was worth burning every bridge. She didn't call back. Because the bridges he referred to were never real. They were rope constructs her family dangled above her, pretending they led somewhere equal, somewhere shared. They were always frayed, always temporary. The rebrand event, held at a renovated art gallery near the Pearl District, drew over 300 attendees. Industry partners, regional press, local chefs, and a few national buyers who had flown in just to get a first look at Eleanor and Finch. The launch video played on loop behind the main stage. Scenes of hand-mixed granola, farmers in Oregon's wine country, handwritten notes placed inside boxes, and finally, the face of Sloane Carter herself. Calm. Unapologetic. Present. When she stepped up to speak, the room fell silent. This company began in a small kitchen, she said. It began with my parents. But it grew into something far beyond what any of us imagined. This next chapter, this name, it reflects how we did it. From the ground up. With ingredients, hands, heart, and an uncompromising commitment to something more than legacy. To growth. To truth. Applause thundered through the gallery. The press coverage was swift. Within 24 hours, the rebrand trended on entrepreneur feeds and business news blogs. From Carter to Finch, Portland founder claims her wings. Why Eleanor and Finch is the family business that didn't stay in the family. When legacy isn't enough, how Sloane Carter redefined ownership. Brandon's silence became the loudest thing about him. That Monday, Sloane received a certified envelope, an internal exit request from Brandon. He would be stepping down as Vice President of Business Development. Effective immediately. No statement. No public thank you. When Leo handed her the envelope, Sloane stared at it for a long moment. Should we announce it? He asked. No, she said. Let it fade. Because the real exit had happened long ago. When he had chosen absence over effort. When he had claimed a crown he had never earned. Later that evening, Harper knocked on her office door. "We've had 3 acquisition inquiries since the rebrand went live," she said. 2 international. Sloane raised an eyebrow. "Already? Joanna thinks they were waiting to see if you could pull it off without the Carter name." Sloane leaned back in her chair. "They know now." She didn't respond to the offers right away. She needed time. Time to rebuild more than just the brand. To make sure her team remained protected, her systems strong, her voice unmistakable in every deal moving forward. She knew now that value didn't reside in a last name or a shared family tree. It resided in who showed up when no one else would. It resided in the people who packed orders by hand, who worked late to reprint labels, who trusted her through rebrand meetings and investment turbulence and sibling egos. It resided in truth. The next day, she walked the fulfillment floor, dressed in jeans and sneakers, no clipboard in hand. Just presence. Just intent. One of the packers, Rhea, a single mom who had joined the company 2 years ago, looked up from sealing a box. "I heard Brandon left." "He did," Sloane said simply. "Good," Rhea replied. "He didn't know where anything was." They both smiled. Later, in her office, Sloane took down the final framed photo that still included the old company name. She replaced it with a new one, a candid photo of her core team standing in the sunlight just outside the warehouse, laughing, half covered in flour, with Eleanor and Finch printed across their shirts. That was her family. Not perfect, but real. The first bulk shipment under the Eleanor and Finch label departed the Boise Fulfillment Center at 6:30 on a gray April morning. 32 pallets, wrapped in tight plastic and loaded with care, rolled onto a Sun Glen Markets freight truck bound for regional distribution centers across the West Coast. It marked the beginning of a new phase, not just for the company, but for the identity Sloane Carter had forged in full view of the world. At headquarters, the energy was electric. Harper Wu ran final quality checks against supplier reports. Nina Reyes was already on her 3rd phone call with a regional buyer in Austin. Leo stood at the front desk, quietly guiding a group of new hires through the structure of their shift rotations. And in her glass-walled office overlooking the main floor, Sloane sat alone with the first official invoice printed under the new brand. A thin white sheet with the Eleanor and Finch logo in crisp black type. She didn't frame it. She didn't need to. She understood what it meant, and what it had cost. Mark Keller called just after 10. "Word on the street is that Sun Glen wants to double next quarter's order if customer response is strong," he said. Sloane already knew. Her team had flagged the internal memo 2 hours earlier. "Let them get through this round first," she replied. "Then we talk about next steps." "You sound calm." "I am." Mark paused. "You don't sound surprised." "I'm not." That evening, she hosted a quiet gathering for her team in the old bakery space. No press. No photographers. Just music, mismatched chairs, pizza boxes on flour-dusted tables, and half-full glasses of cheap Prosecco. It wasn't a celebration of a deal. It wasn't for cameras. It was for them. For what they had done. Nina stood first. "I remember when the freezer used to leak, and we had to dry pack chocolate chip cookies with a hairdryer so they wouldn't bloom on delivery," she said, laughing. Leo raised his drink. "To Sloane, who used to deliver orders herself when we couldn't afford a courier." Harper held up a worn apron. "I kept this from the first trade show booth. It still smells like stress and cinnamon." They laughed. They clinked glasses. And when the laughter faded, a silence settled over the room. Not the tense kind, not the performative kind. The kind that only shows up when people realize they've made it through something together. Sloane stood last. "I didn't think I'd ever say this," she began, "but this feels done. Not finished. Not over. But settled. What we've built is no longer fragile. It's solid. It's us." There was no toast. No speech. Just a shared understanding that the storm had passed, and they were still standing. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at the office. It was handwritten. No return address. Just a short note in Marianne Carter's cursive. Asterisk, I still think about the kitchen. I still believe in Brandon. But I saw you, Sloane. That morning in the conference room. For the first time, I really saw you. And I was proud. Asterisk. No signature. No apology. Just truth, wrapped in the kind of silence her mother had always preferred. Sloane folded the letter and placed it in the back of her desk drawer. Not to treasure it. Not to reread it. But to mark it, like a page turned. By June, Eleanor and Finch had sold out 2 regional launches and was preparing to enter 20 more locations. The company's growth rate outpaced projections by 37%. But Sloane no longer checked metrics before bed. She no longer measured her worth by dashboards. Instead, she spent time on the floor. In product testing labs. In conversation. One afternoon, she stood in the company's small pantry, examining new dried fruit samples. Rico, the head of maintenance, passed by, wiping his hands on a rag. Didn't think you'd still be down here doing taste tests, he said. Sloane smiled, holding up a dried cherry. You'd be surprised how much of the truth is in the pantry. Truth. Rico raised a brow. If it doesn't work here, she said, tossing the cherry into her mouth, it doesn't work anywhere. He chuckled and kept walking. And she stayed in that quiet room, surrounded by shelves lined with jars and bags and tins. Because no matter how many offices she had, this was still the heart of it all. The invitation came on embossed stationery, mailed to the company's new address on Southeast Clay. A local business chamber was hosting their annual Founders and Family Awards Gala. The title Sloane Carter saw at the top made her jaw tighten. Honoring the Carter family legacy in artisan food innovation. Underneath, in smaller print, keynote to be delivered by Brandon Carter. At first, she laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that echoed off her office walls. But when she handed the envelope to Leo, his expression turned to stone. Are they serious? He asked. After everything? She nodded. It's Portland. People love a redemption arc. Are you going? Sloane didn't answer right away. The thought of watching Brandon stand behind a podium, talking about innovation he hadn't created, felt absurd. But something in her shifted. Not anger. Not pride. Curiosity. I might, she said. As a guest. The night of the gala arrived in June fog. Soft strings played from a stage in the museum's central atrium, where wine glasses sparkled and the scent of beet tartlets drifted through the air. Most guests wore their finest. Sloane came in a black blazer, no jewelry, no handlers. Just presence. She took a seat near the back as the evening unfolded. Speeches rolled on. Trophies were handed out. Applause, polite and practiced, echoed against marble. Then the lights dimmed, and Brandon Carter stepped onto the stage. He wore a pressed navy suit and that same confident smile he always summoned when stepping into the spotlight. Behind him, a slideshow rotated images of their family bakery from decades past. Him as a child holding a loaf of sourdough. Their mother kneading dough. Frank behind the cash register. Carter and Crumb, Brandon began, was never just about food. It was about family, legacy, and innovation rooted in tradition. Sloane listened, expression unreadable. Brandon continued, his voice steady. I want to thank the Carter family. My parents, who built something meaningful. And my sister Sloane, whose work, though we sometimes disagreed, carried our vision into a new era. Applause rippled gently through the room. Brandon nodded, stepping back. He hadn't lied. But he hadn't told the truth either. After the program ended, a woman in a floral dress approached Sloane near the coat check. I'm sorry, she said. Are you the Sloane Carter? Sloane offered a faint smile. That depends. I'm in sourcing for Wild Grain Collective, the woman said. I followed your rebrand story closely. What you built. It's inspired a lot of us. We've seen the headlines. But what matters is what you did after. Sloane nodded. After is where it gets real. When she stepped out into the damp night, the wind off the river brushed her cheeks. She didn't feel bitterness. She didn't feel slighted. She felt done. Not because someone handed her a plaque. Because she no longer needed one. The next day, she walked into the Eleanor and Finch campus, now spread across 3 buildings, and took the long way through the facility. Past the baking lab where seasonal flavors were being tested. Past the new in-house design studio where Nina had just hired her second assistant. Past the new hire orientation where Leo was introducing first-day employees to the Finch standard. She paused at the wall by reception. There hung a frame, not of her, but of the original team. Not a stock image. Not a marketing tool. A candid shot. Hands mixing dough, sleeves rolled up, joy in motion. That was the legacy. That was the truth. Her office remained simple. No trophies. No award statues. Just a shelf lined with notebooks, supplier maps, and one faded post-it that read, "You're not temporary." Sloane read it every morning. Because for years, her family treated her like a substitute. But she had become the foundation. And now, no one, *, could write her out of the recipe again.